Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah. So it's full on garlic planting season at the moment, and I thought I'd share with you my garlic planting tips. What I'm going to do in this video is not just how I plant them, but I'm going to show you how to take care of your garlic through the growing season and how to get them all the way to harvest, and then once you've harvested them, how to store them so you've got a complete garlic growing guide. Now we grow a lot of garlic, and we grow enough garlic to last us the whole of the year, and to pickle and to sell our garlic pickles. You might be wondering what I'm doing with these cardboard boxes. If you haven't seen the way I plant my garlic, this is going to be revolutionary for you. So the first things first is to prepare our beds for where we're growing garlic. Now garlic likes a nice, nutritious, fertile soil. It doesn't want to be too acidic, it doesn't want to be too alkaline. It likes that neutral soil. Get rid of any major perennial weeds like this stinging nettle. What I've done here is I've chucked some manure down on top of the existing garden soil, and these sorts of bitter cress and things like that are growing, these will die quite easily. You can pull them up and just leave them on the ground as I've done, or the process that I'm going to use is going to get rid of that anyway, so you don't even have to bother with what I've just done there. I just did it to show you. The manure that I put down is not loads of manure, it's just a light scattering. But what I am going to do as well is I'm going to empty some of my pots out onto this bed. So this is a chili plant that I'm not going to overwinter. So all the compost from that is going onto this bed. And this is one of the tips that I shared with you in my compost recycling video. So you spread that out as a mulch. If you wanted to, that bed is almost ready to plant in. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to turbocharge this, and I'm going to turn it into a process that's hassle-free once you've got it established, and it'll keep you growing garlic without any major trouble through the growing season. And this is where my cardboard comes in. So for those of you that have seen this, you know exactly what I'm going to do next. And for those of you that haven't, you're going to be in for a treat. Now, these are boxes that are left over from having my chimney installed for my wood burner. So this is what the wood burner arrived in. Now this is my rubbish, it's my waste product, and I don't want it to go away from my site. I want to keep my waste in my garden. I don't want to send it off somewhere else. I've produced it, so I'll deal with it. So now this is a complete garlic growing guide. I'm going to show you everything, even including the basics for some of you advanced growers. Now when you have a garlic, you'll normally get a garlic bulb, and it's important to take that bulb apart, and it's these individual cloves that you're going to be planting. Try to keep as much of the patron as possible, the wrapper, but if it does come off, something like that is not the end of the world, okay? Now with your garlic you have two ends. You have the pointy end, which is where the leaves will come in out of, and you have the flat end, and that's where the roots are going to come out of. One of the most common questions I get asked is when people are worried about the garlic not germinating, is they've planted the garlic upside down. It will grow, nature always finds a way. The only thing is, let's give it a helping hand and not cause it to be delayed in any way. Now I've got my bed prepared, I've got my cardboard down on top of the compost and the manure and the fertilizer that's going to keep my garlic fed throughout the growing season. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just make some holes. I've seen some people take on my method, and rather than using the knife that I've got, they use a hole saw, and they've just sort of made this method even better for themselves. For me, my ground is quite soft, I can just push straight in. If your ground is quite hard, take the knife that you're using to cut the cardboard and just loosen that soil up a little bit, just in that planting hole. Yeah, so it's nice and loose. An average clove of garlic is about 1 inch long. Now the minimum depth for garlic when you plant it is to be buried double its depth. They're not like onions, you don't want to plant them shallow, you want to plant these quite deep. They will push up and they will rise, so push that garlic quite deep down. So you can see that garlic peeking its head out of that hole, and then you can just gently cover it back up. Ideally, garlic wants to be planted about 6 inches apart. When you're planting it this far apart and you've got a bare bed, it might look like you're planting something, you know, you're wasting a lot of space. If you look at the size of my hole is about an inch and a half, 2 inches wide. That garlic bulb will easily grow to fill that hole. And when it grows to fill that hole, and that grows to fill that hole, your gap between your garlics has narrowed to about, the gap between the garlics has narrowed to about 4 inches, 3 or 4 inches, even smaller. So depending on how well your garlic grows, obviously. I'm going to continue to fill this cardboard with my holes, making my holes and planting my garlic. Now, the traditional method that people would grow garlic is they'd grow them in exact straight lines, okay? So they'd cut another hole here, so 6 inches this way. That gives the garlic plenty of space to grow, and it's in a nice uniform grid. The reason that people grow garlic like this is when they're weeding out garlic is that they can get their hoe in a lot easier and hoe off any weeds. But because we've put down this cardboard and because of the way we're growing the garlic, we're not digging, we're not disturbing seeds, we're not allowing seeds buried in the soil to germinate. We've got a nice layer of mulch on to provide fertilizer, so we're not going to have to worry about feeding the garlic. We're not going to have to worry about weeds coming up because we've put down this, in effect, what's a weed membrane that's going to suppress any weeds coming up. It's going to break down and it's going to add into feeding the garlic. So what I do is I grow another row in the middle here. So instead of growing them as a grid, I grow them like this in a figure of 5 shape. This is ordinary garlic. I'm not growing garlic to try and get the biggest bulb. I'm not growing them for competition. I like to make the most of my space, so I'm trying to maximize the productivity per piece of ground, right? So now I've managed to squeeze in an extra row of garlic. My bulbs won't get as big, but pound for pound, I always end up with a better harvest this way than if I grew them in straight rows. So you might hear people say, grow garlic on the shortest day of the year and harvest them on the longest day of the year. And you hear that commonly with onions as well. For us, especially in the north of England, I don't think that works. So last year I did an experiment with this patch of land where my beans are growing, or where my runner beans grew. And it was a nice small strip where I planted garlic in October, November, that sort of time. So my ideal time of growing garlic is between the middle of October till the middle of November. That's when I think it's perfect, before the ground has frozen up, while there's enough warmth in the ground for your garlic to get germinated quite quickly. So what I did was I planted this bed here, and you can see the space is about 1.5 feet wide, about 6 foot long. I took this space and I planted garlic using my cardboard method, and I planted them around the end of October. And then I took a similar bed, and as you can see here, and this is actually a better bed in terms of sunlight and a better bed in terms of fertility, because it gets a lot of that fertility washed out from the greenhouse and feeds this bed. And I planted garlic here on the shortest day of the year, so around December, around Christmas Day is when I planted garlic here. And then what I did was I harvested that bed at my usual time. I normally wait till the plant tells me when it's ready to be harvested, or when I want to follow on with a plant, I'll harvest according to when that other plant needs to go into the ground. This bed here, I sowed them on the shortest day of the year and I harvested them on the longest day of the year. And if you go and have a look at the full video of the harvest, you can do a comparison of the two. But what I did was, what I found was that the bulbs just weren't anywhere near as big, the plants weren't anywhere near as healthy, the harvest was just completely incomparable to that bed over there. And for me, the reason that I think that the bed that I plant at my normal time and the bed that I planted at the shortest day of the year, there was such a big difference, was because it's a little bit colder. A lot of the growing guides are tailored for people growing down south, and they're growing down south of England, where it's a little bit warmer. They don't get as harsh a cold as us. and the ground doesn't freeze as quickly, so their ground is probably not as frozen. There's still a bit of warmth left in the soil when they're planting the garlic out compared to us. If we plant it like this, the garlic has a little bit more time to get germinated, get established. See, I nearly planted that upside down. It has that little bit of extra time to get itself established. Then you're going into the dead of winter when your garlic plant's maybe 6 inches tall. And then when it's 6 inches tall, it survives winter and pulls through winter a lot better and a lot stronger. And then when spring comes around and it's time for the plant to grow again, it's got all that energy, it's got all that strength to just woof and fly off and start growing again. See, there is a lot of science behind planting the biggest bulbs that you've got. Okay, so there is a lot of evidence to suggest that planting the bigger the bulb, the better the result. I don't think, and I'll be honest with you, for me, on the scale that I'm growing garlic, I don't think it makes a massive difference, because I'm already not trying to go for the biggest bulbs in the world. I'm going for the biggest harvest that I can maximize. This is where I grew my sweet corn last year. So I planted something here that was a high nitrogen feeder. That's why you've seen the manure go down. And that's quite fresh manure. Don't worry about fresh manure going down like this, because for a number of reasons. We've put fresh manure down, then we've covered it in compost, then we've covered it in card. So we're not going to get that same rain effect that's washing the nutrients out of the manure and washing it and causing a problem further down the stream. And this is what I think that you should be doing whenever you're mulching winter with compost. You should always cover it. Compost alone is not enough of a ground cover for me. I just don't believe it is. Within about 3 weeks, you should see garlic sprouts coming up. You should see short little sprouts coming up. They look like thick blades of grass. And once that's happening, the thing to keep an eye on is make sure that you try and deter as many blackbirds and crows and that kind of thing, because they can sometimes pull the garlic up thinking that there's a little worm sticking its head out the ground and they're coming in for a nice little munch. They don't eat the garlic, they just pull it up and stop it from germinating. Now, before I started using my cardboard method, I used to have a nightmare with crows digging up my garlic and just leaving them. I mean, they just caused a bit of a nuisance. They'd come on, dig the garlic up and then disappear. And remember, when you're dealing with this cardboard, pull out the staples. These look like copper staples. Pull off any sellotape, just so you're not putting microplastics into the ground. Now, I've got a kohlrabi plant here that I want to keep. It's established. It's a plant that'll shoot off when it comes spring again. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to position my cardboard in a way that I don't disturb that plant. So rip that little corner off, pull that leaf up, and everything else can go. See, your holes don't have to be perfect. See, that's good enough for me to start planting in again. Okay, these living plants, just tuck them under, let them die underneath. Absolutely fine. And I'm going to just cover this whole bed with this cardboard and plant my garlic. This whole bed behind me, all the way to the end of that bean plant, this is all going to be garlic. So this is what we're going to be using to make pickles to share with you guys. So remember, we've put a lot of fertilizer down. We've got the compost down, we've got the manure down. You don't need to go in and worry about feeding these plants through winter, especially when you're trying to limit how fast they grow, because we do want them to establish themselves, but if they grow too tall, when the winter winds come, all they're going to do is they're going to knock them over and they're going to damage the plants. So we want to avoid that. But when it comes to spring, and you feel like you want to give your plants a boost, then you could give your plants a liquid fertilizer. But if you've gone for this method, there's absolutely no need. So as the soil's starting to warm up in spring, you're going to see weeds and things come up. But if you've gone for this method with the cardboard as a sheet barrier for weeds, you're not going to have that problem. But if you haven't used this, then make sure that you're weeding out your weeds, taking out any perennials that are popping their heads up, any annuals that are popping their heads up. as we're going through spring and later into spring, just keep an eye on the plants and give them that feed that they need, and give them a balanced feed. Something like a weed tea, a comfrey tea, that'll be really good for them, and that'll help them just to grow on and push on. So the thing about garlic and onions is they start to bulb up as the day lengths get longer. In June and July, when the days are really long, that's when your onions are really going to bulb up and put on their main mass. May, June, July, that sort of time. And that's when the bulk of the bulbing up is going to happen. So at that point, if you want to give them a little bit of a fertilizer, more of a feed, something with a more phosphorus or potassium in, just to encourage that root growth, and that's a good point to give them that. We're planting these plants in the middle of winter, and at this point it seems like it's a long way away before we get to harvesting, but that time soon comes around. Before you know it, you're going to be harvesting them. And when you harvest them when it's not been raining for a few days. Harvest them on a nice dry day when it hasn't rained for about a week or so, so that the bulbs haven't taken on an excessive amount of water, and that just makes it easier to store. So harvest them, pull the whole plant out, cure them, and the way I like to cure them is I like to hang them in the shed, either in a plat or in bunches. Just hang them in the shed, leave them somewhere dry. And we managed to cure our garlic and keep it preserved in the shed, ready for us to use again, without any major issue for almost a year. It's one of the few things that we are self-sufficient in garlic, and that's why we're able to produce so much garlic pickle and share it out with all of you guys. So I hope you've enjoyed what you've seen. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe for regular updates. If you'd like to support our channel, becoming a Patreon is one of the best ways, so you can become a patron, and I'll leave a link for it at the end of this video. Leave me a comment and share your tips, and I'll see you on the next one. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.